Hey there, let's get ready to weave our DIY Manor kit from Handwovens. This is our frame loom. It's giving you some basic instructions like your tapestry needles and beater. We're gonna go ahead and pull this apart. Just be careful that you don't mess with the frame loom itself as you pull these pieces out. Right here is a little QR code to more of our kits and tutorials. We're gonna start with our white warp thread. We'll start by grabbing some out of our butterfly here, just give it a pull, and tying it onto the bottom left-hand corner of our frame loom. From here, you'll count about 3 spaces over and insert your first warp thread. And you'll do the same on the top, counting 3 over and inserting. Then you'll move from top to bottom all the way across your loom, making sure you're not going around the whole loom, just around the peaks. We'll give it a little test and then tie on that end. From here, we'll start measuring out our first couple rows of our weft. We'll do 5 lengths of our weaving, plus a little extra, give it a trim, and go ahead and thread it on whichever needle you want. These longer needles will go the whole length of the weaving, which is kind of nice, but the metal needles are really great for detail work. I'm throwing in a spacer here, and that just holds the place of those lifted warp threads so that we don't have to do it manually for that side. We're just passing through our second row here, and then you'll use your little beater, this comb here, to push those threads down into place. Pull down your spacer so that you don't have to manually go in and out that row. It goes a little faster. For this last little bit, we'll just tuck in our tail by weaving in a couple rows and then tucking it in. Next, we'll take our red thread and get a good amount of yarn, and we'll be double threading this on our tapestry needle. Starting on the right-hand side, we're gonna do our first row of plain weave, and you'll notice that there are 4 threads in my row. You want all 4 threads to be in line, nice in place, and visible. Next, we're only going over 9 threads. So you're going to be weaving in and out 9 threads from the left to the right, and again, make sure that those are all laying nicely in place. Use your beater to push it down, but not too tightly. You want to give it plenty of space. This is what will end up looking like our bricks for our house. So this is about the height we want. I'm gonna go ahead and give it a quick measure. It's about 2 inches, which is great. That's about the height of the door that I want. So that's where I'm gonna pause this wall. And we're actually gonna move to the other side of the wall. So I'm just tucking in this tail here so that it's kind of out of our way. And then starting from the inside, we wanna go, again, 9 warp threads from the inside out. We're gonna do this to match the other side. So we're gonna go until we've got about 2 inches in height here as well. It's important when we get to the top of our wall that they're facing in the same direction as the previous side. So you'll notice my ends are still ending off to the right. We're gonna start with our white thread here, and this again is 2 threads per row. So my needle is sitting in the middle of my cut yarn. Again, I'm just gonna tuck this end in to the back. We will tuck it in the rest of the way later. And these rows I pack in pretty tightly because I don't really need this space to create that brick look for these. I just want it to be a solid white door. I'm gonna weave until I match the height of my 2 walls on either side. And again, make sure that I'm in the same rotation of my over-under warp threads so that when I do this next row, it's catching all of those warp threads the correct way. We'll weave 3 rows here, and then we'll start our spacing for the windows. Alright, we've got our 3 rows done. We're gonna go just 3 warp threads in for this first side of the window and weave for about 1 inch. That's gonna be about the height of the windows we're gonna make. from here, we'll actually pause on that side and we'll get another double threaded needle on our other tapestry needle and weave the other side. We'll start on the right side of our loom, again from the inside out, doing those 3 warp threads on the end. Weave another 1 inch height, and then we'll move to weaving our first window. Thread another piece of white thread on your needle. I like to use a smaller tapestry needle for these smaller windows. And we're going to start on the left window, and it's going to be 5 warp threads across. So you're going to weave in 5 warp threads, get your 2 rows, and then you can tuck in that little tail once it's secured. We're going to do this again for about 1 inch until it matches the height of the wall we created on the left side. Grab another piece of white thread, put it on your tapestry needle again, and we're going to do the same thing on the right side of the window. I'm actually going to snag our leftover thread from the previous row, and I'm going to use it to weave in this middle section because it doesn't have to be very long, so might as well just use what we've got instead of creating more scrap. So you're again just going to weave these rows, making sure all of those threads are visible in each row until they line up with the top of the windows. Now we're going to pick up that first needle that we were using and we're going to weave all the way across, and then we're going to continue weaving all the way across until we hit the top of our loom. Then we'll fill in with a bit of our white thread again at the very top, and then we'll be ready to start weaving our details. Now one quick thing I'll show you is I'm running out of yarn here. So I'm just going to cut that off of the needle, thread a new piece on my tapestry needle because I know we're going to be getting to some tight spaces here, getting to the top of the loom, and the metal needle will just be a bit easier. I'll just put in my new thread and then we'll weave in both sides of that at the end when we tuck in all of our edges. Here you'll see again I'm running out of my thread, so I'm going to show you how to actually go ahead and tuck in your end while you're still in weaving. We're just going to flip it to the back and run it down a couple of our weft passes, and then again just beat it into place and you're set to keep going. At the end of my weaving, I'm just going to put in 5 more rows of plain weave with my white warp thread to secure those in place and add just a little bit of extra height to our house so that we have more to tuck into our frame. We're ready to start our kind of finishing work here, so I'm going to go through and pass all of these extra ends to the back side of the weaving so that I can tuck in what needs to be tucked in, trim off what needs to be trimmed off, and just generally clean up our weaving area. to do some of our detail work. I'm going to start with my black thread and just put a little knot right at the end of the string so that when we pull it through, it doesn't come all the way out. So we'll start on the back, so that knot is on the back. And I'll just create a little handle here that's just a straight up and down line. If you want to add a knot to the front or however you want your doorknob to be, that is totally up to you. I'm also going to put a little window at the top of the door, so I'm going to create just a simple little diamond shape, and then we'll move on to our windows. For the windows, I'm going to insert from the back up, and we're just going to do a simple cross. So I'm going up to the top of my window and over the side. And my thread is getting short here, so I'm going to tie it off. If you have enough length to move to the next window, go for it. We'll do the same thing to the other window, and then we'll move on to our next bit of details. Grab a bit of your green thread, and this is where we're going to add our plants. I like to put a plant on either side of the door and one in the window, but again, this can be totally up to you. I'm really not using any special techniques here. I'm just kind of playing around to get some of the shapes that I want. There are definitely some embroidery tutorials that can show you some more cool ways to do these things. I'm just using things like French knots or straight stitches or these little loops that I just catch at the top. You can really do whatever you want, play around. Just make sure you secure the ends like I'm doing here whenever you move to a next section. And once all your details are complete, we're actually ready to take it off the loom. I'm just popping off all of these little ends on both sides, and then we're going to tie those loops together to keep them securely in place. On this side, I'll show you, I'm actually going to tie on both sides of my weaving first. So I'm going to tie the left side here, and then I'm going to tie the right side just so that I can keep them all kind of in line and they don't get skewed while I'm tying. On this side, to make things even, I did trim that last loop in half so that the rest of my pairs matched up. Another option besides tying is to simply tuck in your ends. So I'm going to use my needle here and go with my head up and grab that loop and then pull it back down through the weaving. This is a little less secure because they can be pulled out a little more easily, but if you don't have the fingers that can tie those tiny knots, this may be a more doable solution for you. So we're all set. Now it's time to get it into our frame. I'm going to tuck in the bottom edge first with all of these little knots as kind of little handholds that make it a bit easier to pull the weaving into place. Once the bottom is in place, you can start with the top. I like to do kind of the edges first, so I'll tuck in one corner and then the other, and then work my way up to the peak. Be careful with that peak because it is a little bit sharp to get the shape that we want, so you just want to be really gentle as you maneuver that into place. Tuck everything in so it's nice and flat the way you want it, and then notice that on the back there is a little hole for you to hang it from, just a little tack or nail. And thanks so much for weaving this little house with me.